Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are listening to this right now, you're probably looking for something, well, something a little different than the mainstream narrative.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, you're looking for the signal and the noise. And today we're not just looking for a signal. We are tapping into a frequency that most of society is desperately trying to jam. We are going completely off the reservation for this one.
It is certainly a broadcast that demands attention. It's not just background noise. It is the sound of the foundation cracking, really.
Exactly. We are doing a deep dive into an ebook that has been described as a nuclear warhead dropped directly on the fortress of modern institutional lies. We are talking about The Right to Be Right, Rejecting Tone Policing and Speech Bans by Conrad Riker.
And nuclear is really the right word for what Riker is doing here.
It is. Let me tell you, this is not a polite academic treatise where the author hedges his bets and tries to please everyone. This is a manifesto. It's a dense, data-driven, philosophical dismantling of the current cultural order. Riker isn't asking for permission here. He's kicking down the door.
That's a very fair assessment. Riker isn't interested in being polite. He's interested in what he calls logos, which he defines as pure reason and logic. And he argues that logos is currently under siege by a culture that prioritizes feelings over facts.
Right. But before we even crack the spine on this one, or I guess swipe the screen since it's an ebook, I need to give a very specific call to action to you, the listener.
Essential step right now.
It is. If you value the show, if you value our ability to cover controversial, heavy-hitting topics like this without getting canceled or demonetized, you need to like and subscribe to the deep dive right now. It helps the algorithm, it helps us, and it keeps this information flowing. We literally can't do this without you, especially when we touch the third rail like we're about to today.
And regarding the source material itself, this is one of those books where hearing us talk about it is one thing, but reading the primary data for yourself is another entirely.
Oh, absolutely.
If what we discussed today resonates with you, if it wakes something up inside you, Riker urges you to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books immediately and buy the ebook. He argues that you need the data-driven precision of his arguments in your hand to really arm yourself against the narrative.
Don't just take our word for it. Go to Amazon Kindle, go to Google Play, get The Right to Be Right. And you were telling me earlier there's a Substack too, right?
Yes, for ongoing analysis of these topics, what Riker calls the battle against the war on logos, you should follow the author at the handle at Conrad and Riker on Substack. He updates it frequently with new data points that reinforce the book's thesis. He's effectively live blogging the cultural collapse.
Okay, let's unpack this. The mission of this deep dive is to explore Riker's central thesis. And that thesis is that Western civilization isn't just changing, it is actively collapsing under the weight of two specific forces. He identifies these as gynocentrism and cultural Marxism.
And he's specifically mapping out how men can reclaim their sovereignty in that landscape. The book is framed as a survival guide for the modern male who feels like the walls were just constantly closing in.
This is going to be particularly valuable for the men's rights activists in our audience, the guys in the manosphere, or honestly, anyone who looks at the state of modern institutions, schools, courts, HR departments, and thinks something is fundamentally broken here. The math just isn't mathing.
Right. Riker frames it as a red pill wake-up call for those exact men. He wants them to understand the history of our institutions before they were captured by feminists and Marxists. And he uses a very provocative term to describe the current era.
Yeah, I saw that.
He calls it a men camp.
That is heavy. And obviously that triggers a lot of historical associations. Let's break that down immediately. What does he mean by using that specific terminology? We have to be clear, we are just reporting his views here.
Of course. He's drawing a direct parallel to the totalitarian propaganda of the 20th century. His argument is that we are living through a systemic, institutionalized demonization of the male sex.
So he's saying men are the new scapegoat.
Precisely. He argues that just as past regimes scapegoated specific minorities to justify tyranny, the modern gynocentric state scapegoats men. It blames patriarchy, which he essentially defines as male competence and structure for every societal ill, while simultaneously demanding men pay for everything.
It's the ultimate double bind. Men are the villains, but they're also the ones keeping the lights on. It's a paradox.
It is a paradox. He argues it's a host-parasite relationship. The host is demonized by the parasite that feeds on it. And to prove it, he starts by dismantling the legal system. He calls this first section the axiom of agony.
The axiom of agony. Let's get into that, because I think most people, even if they're a bit cynical about politics, assume, hey, the law is the law, it's blind, it's fair. If I keep my nose clean, I'm going to be fine.
Riker says that belief is a suicide pact.
Wow.
Yeah, he points to the Duluth model as the smoking gun of institutional capture in the legal system.
The Duluth model, I've heard of this in passing, usually in hushed tones on forums, but Riker goes really deep on it. What exactly is the Duluth model?
It's a protocol used in police training across the West for handling domestic disputes. It originated in Duluth, Minnesota, hence the name, and according to the book, it spread like a virus. Riker describes it as geometry weaponized against masculinity.
Geometry. That's an interesting way to frame a legal concept. What does he mean by geometry weaponized?
Well, the Duluth model essentially posits that domestic violence is a systemic tool men use to oppress women. It operates on a sociological theory, not a criminological one.
Okay, so it starts with an ideological assumption.
Exactly. Therefore, when police arrive at a scene, the training often dictates they must identify the primary aggressor. And in practice, under this model, the primary aggressor is almost always defined by who has the larger physical frame and who is capable of inflicting more harm.
So let's play this out in the real world to understand his point. If a guy is 6'2" and his wife is 5'4", and she's actively attacking him, scratching his face, throwing plates, kicking him, and he just grabs her wrists to stop her from hurting him.
The police arrive. They assess the geometry of the situation. They see a large man holding the wrists of a smaller woman. Under the Duluth logic, he is the threat. He represents the power differential.
Because he's bigger.
Because he occupies more volume in the room. The police are trained to view him as the perpetrator, even if he's the one bleeding. Even if he called 911. Riker argues this strips context of all meaning.
It creates a completely skewed reality.
It creates a judicial environment where female violence is invisible because it's labeled reactive or emotional,
Yeah.
and male self-defense is a felony because of his size.
That is terrifying. It's like being guilty of physics. You are guilty because you exist in 3 dimensions more than the other person.
And the book argues it's driven by money. This is a key theme Riker returns to over and over. Follow the money. You cannot understand the oppression of men without understanding the financial incentives behind it.
So where is the money coming from in this context?
Riker breaks down the Violence Against Women Act, or VIWA. He argues it created a perverse incentive structure. States get federal dollars based on the volume of arrests and restraining orders they process.
Wait, really? So the more men they arrest, the more funding the police department gets?
Exactly.
Right.
It effectively puts a bounty on the heads of men and fathers. It turns the justice system into what Riker calls a meat grinder. If you arrest the man, you generate a statistic that qualifies the state for the grant money.
And if they don't arrest him?
If you investigate the woman, or if you say, look, this was a mutual argument, go cool off, you generate nothing. The economic incentive is to arrest the man every single time. The department needs that cash flow for new cruisers and overtime pay.
It turns justice into a business model, a volume business where men are the raw material.
Yes.
And speaking of business models and money, we have to talk about the massive cultural turning point Riker highlights in the book, the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial.
Riker calls this the Emperor's New Clothes moment for the 21st century.
It really was. I mean, the whole world watched that play out. It was completely unavoidable. Why does Riker think it was so pivotal for his thesis?
Because for years, the dominant cultural narrative was, believe all women. Riker argues this slogan is actually a demand for the suspension of logic. It's a demand to believe without evidence.
An anti-logos statement.
Exactly. It essentially says her gender is her evidence. But the Depp trial brought what Riker calls forensic reality into a head-on collision with that narrative. You had audio recordings of her admitting to hitting him. You had photos. You had hard data.
And suddenly, that victim narrative just collapsed. We all heard her voice on those tapes taunting him, telling him to tell the world that he, a man, was a victim of domestic violence and seeing who would believe him.
It crumbled. Riker says it exposed that believe all women was really just a cover for female abuse. It showed the world that women can be, and often are, the aggressors in a relationship.
Which totally shatters the Duluth model assumptions we just talked about.
It does. But, and this is a huge but that Riker emphasizes in the book, we shouldn't get too optimistic about the Depp verdict.
Why not? Depp won. Doesn't that prove the system works if you just fight hard enough and tell the truth?
Riker says Depp won because he had a $30 million war chest. He compares Johnny Depp to a guy named Brian Banks.
Brian Banks. That name sounds familiar, but remind the listeners who that is and what happened.
He was an NFL prospect, a high school football star with a full-ride scholarship to USC. He was falsely accused of rape by a classmate in a school hallway.
Right.
But he didn't have millions of dollars. He didn't have a dream team of Hollywood lawyers.
He just had the standard public defender.
Right. And his public defender told him, look, if you go to trial, you're a large black man accused by a young girl. You will get 41 years to life. Take the plea deal.
Unbelievable. So he took the plea.
He did. He served 5 years in prison and 5 years on probation wearing a GPS anklet. He lost his football career. He lost his youth.
Did the truth ever come out?
Years later, yes. The accuser actually contacted him on Facebook and was secretly recorded admitting she fabricated the whole thing. He was eventually exonerated, but his entire life was completely derailed.
So Riker's point is that justice is essentially a luxury good.
In a gynocentric regime, yes. If you are a man, you have to buy your innocence back from the state at a premium. If you're a normal guy, a Brian Banks, the meat grinder just eats you alive.
The system assumes guilt, and you have to purchase the opportunity to prove your innocence. And most men simply can't afford the cover charge.
That's the tragic reality Riker is trying to expose.
That leads us directly into another massive part of the book, the family court system. If criminal court is bad, family court seems to be the deepest circle of hell in Riker's analysis. He refers to it as a wealth transfer mechanism.
He views family court as the actual engine of the matriarchy. It starts with what he calls the no-fault divorce syllogism. Riker points out that marriage is the only contract in the Western world where one party, usually the wife, statistically speaking, can break the contract without cause, be rewarded with half of the other party's assets, and face absolutely no penalty.
If you did that in business, if you walked into your partner's office and said, I'm bored, I'm dissolving the company, give me half the machinery, and pay me a salary for the next 10 years, you'd be laughed out of court. You'd be sued for breach of contract immediately.
Exactly. But in family court, it's standard procedure. And according to the book, it gets even worse when you factor in Title 4D.
Title 4D. This sounds like bureaucratic alphabet soup, but Riker claims it's the root of the evil here. Unpack this for us.
It is the section of the Social Security Act that creates the financial incentives for the state to separate fathers from their children. Basically, the state government gets kickbacks or incentive payments from the federal government for every single dollar of child support they collect.
Wait, so the state effectively becomes a collection agency that takes a cut.
Riker argues the state essentially becomes the substitute husband. The woman divorces the man, kicks him out of the house, but uses the power of the state to extract his resources.
And the state is happy to do it because they get paid.
The state takes a cut of that extraction to fund its own bureaucracy. The judges, the clerks, the administrators, their salaries and department budgets rely on this money.
Sure.
So the judge and the system itself all have a direct financial interest in maximizing child support payments.
And how do you maximize those payments from a legal standpoint?
By minimizing the father's custody time. If custody is split 50-50, support payments are usually lower or even zero because the costs balance out between the households.
Makes sense.
But if the mother has sole custody, the payments are pushed to the maximum. Therefore, the state is heavily incentivized to minimize the father's role in his children's lives in order to maximize the state's own revenue.
They are literally selling the father's time with his children back to him.
That's exactly Riker's conclusion.
It's a systemic conspiracy against fatherhood, driven entirely by profit. That is incredibly bleak. It makes you realize why so many men feel trapped and hopeless when dealing with family court.
And Riker points out that the silver bullet used to ensure this happens is the ex parte restraining order.
How does that work?
A woman can claim she feels unsafe. No hard evidence required, just a stated feeling of fear. And based on that alone, the court will evict the man from his own home, seize his firearms, and bar him from seeing his kids before he ever even gets a hearing to defend himself.
Guilty until proven innocent again.
Riker calls this the nuclear option used to secure custody leverage. Because once he's out of the house, the status quo is established. The court likes to maintain the status quo, so he almost never gets back in. It's a tactical strike to win the custody war before the first battle is even fought.
It's terrifying because it bypasses due process entirely. It assumes the man is a physical danger, based purely on an unverified accusation. And Riker argues this isn't just about law, right? It's deeply tied to economics. He moves from the courtroom to what he calls the ledger of larceny in Section 2.
Yes, Section 2 is where the book gets heavily into the economic data. Riker challenges the mainstream feminist narrative of the glass ceiling by exposing the reality of the glass cellar.
The glass cellar! I love that imagery. We always look up at the boardroom, but we never look down at the sewer.
It's the subterranean reality of civilization. Riker cites Bureau of Labor Statistics data showing that men represent approximately 92% of all workplace fatalities.
92%. That's staggering. It's not a gap, that's a massive chasm.
It's almost exclusively men dying on the job. Riker argues that men do the dirty, dangerous, and deadly work. They are the ones down in the coal mines, out on the deep-sea oil rigs, the high-voltage linesmen working in the middle of an ice storm to restore power. They are the actual infrastructure.
Right, the invisible backbone of society.
When you flush your toilet, a man is dealing with the sewage. When you turn on your lights, a man is risking electrocution to keep them on.
But all we ever hear about in the media is the wage gap. Women make 77 cents on the dollar. It's on every bumper sticker and repeating in every HR seminar.
And Riker completely destroys the wage gap myth using economic data. He calls it a hazard premium. He argues that if you control the data for hours worked, the physical danger of the job, and the actual career choices being made, the wage gap completely disappears.
So men aren't just handed more money for existing.
Men aren't paid more for being men. They're paid more for risking their lives and working 80-hour weeks in incredibly uncomfortable and dangerous conditions.
So the argument is that women want the high boardroom salary without taking on the oil rig risks.
Precisely. Riker argues that the glass ceiling narrative is essentially about elite, privileged women wanting power while completely ignoring the millions of men trapped in the glass cellar who are keeping civilization running. He says it's class privilege masquerading as gender oppression.
And he takes this economic analysis straight to the tax code, too. He has this concept called the tax contribution syllogism.
This is a crucial part of his broader parasite argument.
Right.
Riker claims that when you look at the raw data regarding net tax contribution versus the net consumption of state services, men are the overwhelming benefactors of the state.
Meaning men pay the taxes.
Men pay the vast majority of all income taxes because they work the most hours and earn the highest hazard pay in those dangerous jobs.
And who is consuming all the services those taxes pay for?
Women. Riker argues the data shows women are the primary beneficiaries of the welfare state, healthcare spending, education subsidies, and public housing. So essentially, the state is an apparatus that confiscates wealth from male labor and redistributes it to fund female consumption.
He calls it a bachelor tax reborn, doesn't he?
Yes. In the past, single men were sometimes explicitly taxed by governments to encourage marriage. Now, the tax is implicit. A single man works hard, pays high income taxes, and those taxes fund the welfare checks, the housing, and the food stamps for single mothers who divorce their husbands.
You are paying for the breakdown of the family structure.
You are subsidizing your own obsolescence as a father and a husband.
And then there's the part he calls the longevity tax.
Right. Post-mortem slavery, as Riker bluntly calls it. Men work harder, they take more physical risks, and biologically, they die younger, about 5 years earlier on average than women. Women live longer.
So they outlive the men who provided for them.
So women survive to spend the pensions and the Social Security benefits that the men work themselves to an early grave to fund. The transfer of wealth from men to women continues even after the man is literally in the grave.
It's a brutal, cold calculation when you lay it out like that.
It is. And it leads directly to Riker's host-parasite metaphor. He says civilization is fundamentally a male invention and an ongoing male maintenance project. If men simply decided to stop, if there was a general strike of their producers, for just 48 hours, civilization would completely collapse.
No power, no sewage removal, no trash collection, no food delivery to the grocery stores.
Exactly. Riker says the modern matriarchy only exists because men allow it to exist by continuing to wake up and go to work every day. The whole strong, independent woman narrative falls apart the exact moment the electricity goes out and the shelves at Whole Foods are empty.
That's a really powerful image. It's an Atlas Shrugged scenario. But it raises the obvious question, why do men keep doing it? Why do we keep fueling this machine that just grinds us up and spits us out? Riker gets deep into the psychology of this in Section 3. He talks a lot about solipsism.
Yes, this is the philosophical core of the book. Riker draws heavily on Arthur Schopenhauer here. He defines female solipsism as the inherent belief that my feelings create reality.
I feel, therefore it is.
Exactly. In a rational, male-oriented worldview, which is logos facts dictate reality. Gravity exists whether you like it or not, whether it hurts your feelings or not. If a bridge is poorly engineered, it collapses, no matter how much you feel it should stay up.
Right.
But Riker argues that the modern feminist worldview is based on what academia calls standpoint epistemology.
Standpoint epistemology. That sounds like dense academic jargon. What does that actually mean in plain English for the guys listening?
It's the idea that your lived experience is more valid than objective empirical data.
Yeah.
If a woman says she feels unsafe, she's unsafe, even if she's sitting in a highly secure room surrounded by puppies. Her internal emotional state overrides the external physical reality. And because society is currently gynocentric, we are forced by institutions to treat her feelings as literal facts.
And Riker calls the weaponization of this tears as tyranny.
Yes. In the corporate world, in HR disputes, or in the legal system, female emotional distress is used to completely bypass logic and evidence. If a woman cries in a meeting, the man she's arguing with is automatically perceived as wrong.
The tears are the evidence.
The tears are treated as proof of his aggression. It overrides due process. It hacks the male empathy instinct. Men are biologically wired to stop female distress, to protect women. So when she cries, he capitulates to stop the crying. Riker says this is a highly effective psychological weapon.
And then there's the rationalization, hamster. I've seen this term thrown around online a lot, hamster duration. It's kind of a funny word, but what is the actual psychological mechanism Riker is talking about here?
It's a humorous internet term for a very real cognitive mechanism called post hoc rationalization. Riker describes it as the mental wheel spinning furiously in a person's head to reframe their own bad behavior or poor choices as virtuous.
Give me an example of this from the book so we can ground it.
The book discusses the alpha widow, or the concept of regret as rape. Riker looks at how consensual encounters can be retroactively reframed as assault. Let's say a woman willingly sleeps with a high-status male, an alpha hoping to lock him down for a relationship. He sleeps with her, but he doesn't call her the next day. He exercises his option to leave.
She feels rejected. That obviously stings.
It stings her ego. But her ego cannot accept the reality that she made a bad strategic move, or that she wasn't high value enough to keep him around, or that she was just pumped and dumped.
Right.
So the hamster wheel starts spinning. She tells herself, I didn't choose to sleep with him and get rejected. He manipulated me. He took advantage of my vulnerability. I was coerced. She retroactively reframes a consensual bad choice as victimization to protect her ego.
So it literally turns regret into a crime.
It creates a reality where women are never accountable for their own choices. If the outcome is bad, it must be because the man was evil, not because she was foolish or made a miscalculation. And Riker ties this directly to the concept of the shit test.
This is another term that gets thrown around a lot in the manosphere. How does Riker define it biologically?
He uses an evolutionary psychology framework. He argues a shit test is a biological audit. A woman subconsciously creates conflict or drama out of nowhere to test a man's strength and his emotional frame.
She's shaking the fence to see if it falls over.
Precisely. In the wild, historically, a weak male cannot protect her and the offspring from predators or rival tribes. So her biology demands that she tests him. She picks a fight about how he loads the dishwasher. She insults his clothes before a party. She creates chaos.
And what is she looking for?
She wants to know if he is strong enough to handle her chaos without breaking. If he apologizes, if he capitulates, if he gets overly emotional, which is the nice guy response. He fails the test. He loses her respect and eventually her attraction.
So the nice guy approach, trying to reason with her, trying to appease her and make her happy, is actually the exact wrong move biologically.
Riker argues the nice guy fallacy is thinking that being submissive and accommodating will earn you love and desire. It doesn't. It earns you contempt. The biological female imperative seeks strength, not subservience. She wants a rock, not a pillow.
So what does the book say is the right response?
Stoicism. You ignore the manufactured drama. You laugh at it. You hold your frame. You refuse to be moved by the emotional chaos she is throwing at you. You show her through your actions that you are the immovable object.
That makes a lot of sense. And Riker even reframes the whole Karen meme in this context, right?
Yes, this part is brilliant. He says a Karen isn't just an annoying, entitled lady demanding to speak to the retail manager. She is a woman weaponizing the power of the state. She sees a man doing something she dislikes, birdwatching, having a BBQ in a park, just existing in her vicinity, and she immediately calls the police.
She calls the patriarchy to handle it.
Exactly. She claims to hate the patriarchy, but she relies on it completely to enforce her personal emotional boundaries. She is leveraging the state's monopoly on violence to serve her feelings. I am uncomfortable, therefore men with guns must come and remove you. It's the ultimate expression of solipsistic entitlement.
It all connects so perfectly. The psychology drives the legal system, which in turn drives the economics. Now let's move to section 4, the war on the mind. Because Riker argues this indoctrination starts very young.
He calls this section the pedagogy of the pawn. Riker argues the modern education system has declared a literal war on boys.
How so? Walk us through his argument there.
First, he points to the feminization of the classroom environment. Sitting completely still for 8 hours a day, rote memorization, strict compliance, verbal consensus over debate. These are traits that naturally favor female biology and development.
And boys don't operate that way.
No. Boys are naturally kinetic, they're competitive, they have hunter-gatherer biology, they learn by doing, by moving, by competing with each other. They learn through establishing hierarchy and through physical friction.
So when a young boy can't sit still for 8 hours, when he acts like a normal boy,
The system medicates him. Riker points to the skyrocketing astronomical rates of ADHD diagnoses and the massive prescription rates of amphetamines like Ritalin and Adderall given to young boys.
just to keep them quiet in class.
He claims this is a deliberate attempt to chemically sedate the male spirit, to turn natural lions into compliant sheep. We are doping an entire generation of boys because female teachers don't know how, or don't want, to handle their natural masculine energy.
It's essentially chemical castration of the hunter instinct.
And then, if those boys make it to college, they face the Title IX tribunals.
Right. The campus courts.
We mentioned the Dear Colleague letter from the Obama administration earlier. That letter effectively removed due process on college campuses regarding sexual assault allegations. A male student can be expelled, his life ruined, on a mere accusation.
No trial, no right to cross-examine.
None. They are destroyed by a preponderance of evidence standard, which is basically a 50-50 coin flip, rather than the legal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt.
And Riker talks about herstory in the education system too, the rewriting of history textbooks.
He uses a really stark comparison. The Manhattan Project versus the suffragette movement. Riker argues history is being actively rewritten to center women and erase male achievement. He points out the undeniable reality that men split the atom, built the rockets that went to the moon, cured polio, and engineered the entirety of the modern world.
But the textbooks focus disproportionately on the suffragettes getting the right to vote.
He calls it an insult to physics to equate the two. One group unlocked the fundamental forces of the universe and changed the course of human capability. The other group walked around holding signs demanding things. He argues this disproportionate focus is done deliberately to demoralize young men in school, to make them feel like their gender has contributed nothing of unique value.
It's erasing male achievement to serve a modern political narrative. And the media is completely in on it too. Riker calls this the spectrum of subversion.
Think about the bumbling dad trope on television. Compare the father in Father Knows Best from the 1950s, a man who was wise, strong, and respected by his family, to modern dads like Homer Simpson or Peter Griffin.
They're complete idiots.
Riker says this is a psychological operation, a psyop. It's designed to subconsciously erode societal respect for fatherhood. If the dad is portrayed as a lovable but incompetent idiot, the family doesn't really need his leadership. And if they don't need him, the state can step in and replace him.
And then you have the whole girl boss trend in movies.
Riker is absolutely brutal on this topic. He points to movies like The Woman King or the recent Charlie's Angels reboots. You have these 120-pound women physically dominating and beating up 200-pound trained male soldiers.
Which is biologically absurd.
He says this intentionally gaslights the audience about biology. It teaches young women they're physically equal to men in combat, which is highly dangerous because it leads them to confront men in real life, expecting movie physics to apply to reality. And simultaneously, it tells men their innate physical strength doesn't matter or is somehow obsolete.
And then there was that infamous Gillette commercial, The Best Men Can Be.
The ultimate corporate monetization of misandry. A men's razor company actively insulting its own core customer base to appeal to a feminist cultural narrative.
Telling men to stop being toxic.
It framed traditional masculinity, the instinct to protect, to provide, to compete, as inherently toxic. Riker uses this as the prime example of get oak, go broke, but he notes something important. The ideology often trumps the profit motive for these corporations. The people inside these companies are willing to lose millions of dollars just to push the ideological message.
Riker also touches on the medical bias against men. He calls it the medical industrial complex.
He does a side-by-side comparison of funding for breast cancer versus prostate cancer. They have very similar mortality rates, but breast cancer gets billions more in federal funding, corporate marketing, and public awareness campaigns. There are pink ribbons on everything from yogurt cups to NFL uniforms.
But prostate cancer gets almost nothing in comparison.
Riker argues this data proves society inherently values female life over male life. Male suffering is invisible and expected. When men die, it's just a statistic. When women die, it's treated as a national tragedy.
And the soy boy phenomenon, Riker addresses this. Is that just an internet meme, or is there actual science behind what he's saying?
Riker points to the hard science of environmental xenoestrogens, the microplastics, the agricultural pesticides, and the massive amounts of birth control hormones that end up in the recycled municipal water supply.
So it's in the water we drink?
He argues this is actively lowering male testosterone on a massive population level, creating a physically weaker, more docile and compliant male populace. We are chemically engineering men to be less aggressive and more passive so they are easier to manage. It's a literal Brave New World scenario.
Okay, we've covered the legal trap, the economic theft, the psychology of solipsism, and the cultural indoctrination. It's a very grim picture. It feels like the walls are totally closing in on men. But Section 5 is where Riker finally pivots. He says there is a solution.
Yes. The book is titled The Right to Be Right, and the solution begins with the absolute rejection of tone policing.
What does rejecting tone policing mean practically in day-to-day life?
It means prioritizing logos logic and truth over pathos emotion. Riker says men have been socially conditioned to apologize for stating facts if those facts happen to hurt someone's feelings.
Oh, I can't cite those crime statistics. It's insensitive.
Exactly. I can't talk about biological IQ differences. It's mean. I can't bring up the wage gap data. The solution Riker proposes is simple. Stop apologizing for reality.
Separate harm from offense.
That's the key distinction. Harm is physical damage or financial theft. Offense is just a feeling inside someone else's head. Riker says you have the absolute right to state verifiable facts about crime stats, about evolutionary biology, about economics, even if it deeply offends the listener. The truth is not hate speech. The truth is the only thing that actually matters.
But if the entire system is rigged against you from family court to HR, can you really win just by arguing the facts?
No. Riker argues you cannot win inside their system. The game is fundamentally rigged. So you have to exit the game. He calls for strategic withdrawal.
This is what the internet calls monk mode or ghost mode, right?
Yes. This brings us back to the Atlas Shrugged concept we discussed. Riker suggests economic sanctions. Men should withdraw their labor and their engagement from a system that actively hates them.
Don't feed the beast.
Exactly. Don't work 80 hours a week just to pay exorbitant taxes to a state that despises your gender. Work only enough to sustain yourself and your goals. Starve the beast. Stop buying the expensive diamond rings. Stop funding the lavish dates. Stop fueling the consumer economy that hates you.
And a big part of this is the marriage strike.
He is incredibly adamant about this point. He says marriage under the current laws is simply a terrible legal contract for a man. If you are entering a contract where you have a 50% statistical chance of losing half your life assets and access to your own children, the only rational, logical move is to refuse to sign the contract.
Do not get married.
Don't get married. Don't sign the paper. And don't cohabitate in states that have common law marriage provisions, because they will trap you that way too.
So stay single, keep your resources to yourself.
And secure those resources so the state can't touch them. Riker talks about acquiring the golden passport. This means acquiring high-level skills that are portable and unseizable. Learn to code, master a physical trade, become entirely indispensable. And he is very, very big on crypto and Bitcoin in this section.
Why Bitcoin specifically? Why not just gold or real estate?
Because he calls Bitcoin the financial instrument of the male exodus. It's a way to completely bypass the fiat matriarchy.
How does that work in practice?
If your money is sitting in a traditional bank account, a family court judge can seize it with a signature. The IRS can freeze your accounts. If your wealth is in real estate, they can put a lien on your house. But if your wealth is in Bitcoin, held in a private key that you memorized in your head, it is mathematically unseizable.
They can't take what they can't access.
It gives you ultimate sovereignty. It represents true property rights that the state cannot violate with a court order. It's fuck you money in the truest, most literal sense of the term.
He also talks about building parallel institutions. He uses the term the New Jerusalem.
He envisions the creation of male-only spaces, professional guilds, networking groups, private businesses that operate strictly on merit and logic, and that explicitly exclude HR departments and DEI mandates.
The complete separation.
Creating a manosphere economy where sheer competence is the only metric that matters. He says men need to stop trying to fix Harvard, or trying to reform Disney, or trying to vote their way out of this. Let those institutions rot from their own incompetence. build your own parallel structures.
And then he details this protocol called the Iron Return. What is that?
It's a physical and mental protocol, he suggests, for men trying to break out of the conditioning. A strict 40-day period of physical isolation, intense training, and fasting.
A reset.
Yes. He says men need to physically detox from the soy culture. Get completely off the internet, lift heavy weights to the point of exhaustion, eat a clean diet, and fast to clear the mind. Reclaim your natural testosterone levels and your innate biological aggression. You have to kill the inner weakling that society installed in you.
And the goal of all this is to become what he calls the Stoic sovereign.
That's the ultimate mental defense, the final evolution, to become the rock in the ocean. When the waves of female hysteria and societal solipsism crash against you, you don't move an inch. You define the frame of the interaction. Riker says, men must define the frame, or society will blow the walls down. You must be the architect of your own reality, or someone else will build a prison for you.
That brings us to the end of the deep dive material. We've unpacked the Aristotelian logic Riker uses throughout the book. We've looked at the rhetorical kill shots he provides to dismantle these feminist arguments in real time.
And the "we built that" syllogism he outlines is the ultimate kill shot.
Remind the listener of that one.
Whenever you hear someone complaining that the patriarchy is evil and oppressive, Riker says to remember one undeniable fact. Men built the roads you drive on. Men built the electrical grid you use to complain on the internet. Men built the hospitals you were born in. The entire physical and technological platform that modern feminism stands on to complain about men was entirely built and is currently maintained by men.
You cannot critique the structure while safely standing on the balcony we built for you.
Exactly. It's the ultimate mic drop.
And Riker leaves the reader with one final, deeply provocative thought that really stuck with me. If this entire empire of lies relies completely on male silence and male physical labor to function, what happens the day men simply decide to stop?
It's the question that should keep the establishment awake at night in a cold sweat. If the beast of burden walks away from the yoke, the wagon stops moving. And Riker suggests the beast is already starting to unhitch himself. The general strike of men has already begun. It's just happening silently, one man walking away at a time.
And that is a wrap on our deep dive into the right to be right. Listen, if this discussion fired you up, if it made you think, or honestly, even if it just made you incredibly mad, you need to read the source material for yourself. We only scratch the surface of the data he provides. Go to Amazon Kindle, go to Google Play Books, and buy The Right to Be Right by Conrad Riker. Support the author. He is out there doing the heavy lifting for all of us.
And don't forget to follow him on Substack at the handle @ConradNRiker. The battle for logos is ongoing. He's on the absolute front lines, and you don't want to miss the updates he posts there.
And finally, support us. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this deep dive with a friend, a brother, or a son who desperately needs a wake-up call. Help us keep the lights on so we can keep bringing you the unfiltered truth. Stay stoic, stay sovereign, and refuse to apologize for the truth. We'll see you on the next deep dive.